This is JGod. If you play Warzone, you probably know JGod. He's been one of the biggest Warzone creators since the very beginning. And since the Black Ops 6 integration, he has made this video. It's called Black Ops 6 Warzone integration is a mess, but what's new? I'm hoping he goes into the things he likes and the things he doesn't, his opinions on it. But I don't know. We haven't watched it yet. As per usual, we're going in raw.
The Black Ops 6 integration is here, and it's been a few days. I kind of want to let things settle out, and I want to talk a little bit about the pros and cons. The game is in a good spot if it were working properly, but there's also a lot of issues with the game. But I'll go ahead and kind of run through the positives and talk a little bit about the negatives. But overall, let's go through some positives. So we got the camos. I think that it's cool that Warzone...
So I think the camos could have been done better. Just having it all come down to eliminations and kills is a little silly. And then the getting kills underneath enemies' UAVs, there's nothing you can do to prompt that. And I think anytime that there are challenges where you can't do something to actively get that, that's a problem.
Warzone finally has a unique camo, regardless if you're going for
example, the launchers in Black Ops 6, first of all, they're impossible to hit with the HE1. But on top of that, you need the enemies to call in 5 streaks a game. That's not on you, that's on them. And then you have to hit it. That part's on you. But
or not, I think that's a cool feature. Backpacks finally being gone. Remember, we had to do backpack looting. We had AI on the map in Warzone 2. It introduced so many issues into the game that I'm glad we're finally getting away from that are really holding the game back. I think custom reticles is nice to have back. We didn't really have that since Cold War Vanguard around that time. And then once we went to Warzone 2, we kind of eliminated all that, and they really only came out with
JGod, we get it. Warzone 2 sucked.
Pay to win reticles. Not that they were actually pay to win, but the only way you can get different reticles is for buying a blueprint, which I thought was unfortunate. We do have a title update coming out very soon with this week's event. Normally so the title update happened today, so I'm curious, based off of what he's saying, where we go from this. Allows them to do a bigger update that will address hopefully some of the outlying issues that are quickly fixed, and then some other issues that hopefully are bigger that they can also fix in the game. But they really haven't talked much. They've had a few things here or there, like, oh, we're working on this, we're working on this.
Honestly, I think they've actually talked more than they normally do. Am I crazy to say that? Like, I think that the information we've been given this year about like the things that they're working on has been more up to date and more frequent than any other time before.
But there's too many issues that they really haven't addressed, and then hopefully a lot of these will just be fixed as we get these future updates, as they have in the past. Always integrations are kind of a buggy mess, and if you've been through any of the integrations, we know that that's the case for.
And honestly, this one I think is probably the best integration we've had. But aside from Rebirth Island,
from Verdansk 84 to Caldera, tons of issues, and every year it kind of ends up.
So actually, if we go back and look at one of the biggest downfalls of Warzone, it was Caldera, not Warzone 2, Caldera. And you're going to think I'm crazy for saying this, but hear me out. When the Caldera was introduced, the game was a disaster. And they introduced it right before all the devs went on Christmas break. So instead of being a disaster for a couple days, even a week, even 2 weeks, it was like a month before all of these issues with the implementation got resolved. A month. That's a 12th of the year where it was nearly unplayable, in my opinion. Then in my opinion, the longevity of Warzone was screwed by Warzone 2. But the Caldera, that was a huge mess up. That's why they're introducing the integration now.
Simplistic. I know some people are upset about the overkill being gone, but now you got to use a wild card.
It's fine.
I think that is a good way for the game to go, and it creates diversity in loadouts. Where you can have 5 attachment builds, 8 attachment builds, late game builds. All kinds of variety in your creative class. And that brings us to the meta is currently in a really good spot. Probably the best it's been in years. We already have more weapon diversity in the first week of the game.
Although playing today, I saw a lot of players using Modern Warfare 3 weapons, like a lot.
We've had all last year. That's including right now, there are a few different ways to bug out your loadout where you get 8 attachments when it's really only 5, and you're able to use glitch, bugged, or broken weapons like the shotguns, the Doom shotguns, and the pistols. There's different things that are broken in the game that'll get fixed. They'll get reverted. It's kind of weird that when you do these integrations, a lot of problems that they've solved already somehow make their way into it.
I can tell you exactly why that happens, because when they're working on a build, they're often building the next update, and when they're working on that update, they are working on a build that is previous to that current update. So for example, we're at 1.62 update. Previous to that, we had 1.61. Previous to that, we had 1.6. When they were building in the new update, they were probably not working on the build that was 1.61. They were probably working on one that was actually probably like 1.55 and forget to integrate some of the things that they already fixed.
I'm sure there's something that happens behind the
At least
scenes
that's how
that
I
causes
understand it.
these issues, because obviously Raven's working primarily on Warzone, and then Treyarch primarily working on multiplayer and zombies. And the execution of multiplayer and zombies is pretty good. And Raven, it's kind of like they have to start working on the integration within the year or so, because obviously they got to work based off, I don't know. I'm sure it's super complicated. End of day, it doesn't matter. Multi-billion-dollar company, they got to figure it out. The meta, I think, is in a really good spot where you're able to use multiple different weapons. There are some issues with some of the attachment balance, which we'll talk about.
Interesting.
In
I don't know this one.
Negative section, but in general, I feel like there's a ton of viable options. Maybe not necessarily hard meta, but there's tons of variety that you can choose
I agree
from
with that.
if you prefer older games. And they've gone and changed some attachments to make it easier without all the cons, and it definitely modifies the viability of a lot of the older weapons. I think lootable perks being back is good. And the perk packages combined with this, where you can kind of add up to have around.
It's smart, right? To have perks that you can only get out of your loadout, like outside of that, because then that adds a little bit more incentive to continue to loot after you have got your loadout.
10 or so, or maybe 8 or so perks is cool.
Also,
I think
not having 18 armor plates constantly on you, I think is an improvement. Like I found like, okay, I got into 6 gunfights back to back. I got my 6 kills. Now I'm out of armor plates. I want to go after that guy, but I got to go loot some bodies or do some things before I get my 6 armor plates back, which I think is a good thing. And then you can have the armor plate vest.
I wish it had a little bit of voice chat like we originally had in Warzone 1. I think the UI update is awesome. Having everything laid
UI
out
update is way better.
Nice for a change. Emotes and sprays, I never use them, but I know some people like.
Whoever improved the UI, yes, it's not perfect, but whoever improved that needs a raise.
Those pings got nerfed, which is huge. A lot of times you're able to track through walls, essentially, where you ping someone, you can see them for half an hour. That is kind of got nerfed, and it's not nearly as strong, even though pings are still super powerful. I like the dedicated melee. And then Omni Movement. I think Omni Movement brings a lot to the table. I know a lot of people focus primarily on, just diving. People aren't using the dive, but the reality is the sprinting in all directions.
The sprinting in all directions is great. And the thing that I have noticed using the diving for the most is if I'm getting into a gunfight and I'm on like a roof or something like that, and like there's a little bit of a ledge, if I start losing that gunfight, I will dive backwards and it'll allow me to get underneath that cover or around a corner or something like that and not have to like out of engage that gunfight and try to run away, which I think is a huge improvement.
Sliding in all directions, and certain features related to the Omni Movement in that aspect are super, like they're very well executed, and the game feels night and day different, but I think they do gotta maybe tweak some stuff around that it'll get a little bit more optimized for the flavor that people want out of Warzone. Quick list of that's the pros. A lot of that's kind of expected. And
all right, get into the bad stuff.
When we get into the negatives, there's a lot of things that I'm seeing on the timeline,
audio is
on Twitter, in the comments section.
They started working on
all
that
these
today.
Kinds of things. I think it's important to identify what is probably a bug or a feature. I know we made fun of this a lot during Modern Warfare.
Honestly, this update has been the smoothest Warzone has felt to me since Verdansk. I will 100% say that. I'm getting less packet burst, which I'm shocked by. Maybe I'm getting less packet burst in Warzone than I am in multiplayer or zombies. Insane. Last year, Warzone was almost unplayable for me because of packet burst. That's one. The movement makes the game feel better for me. I like Area 99. I like this integration, but problems. We're going to get into the problems.
Life cycle, because you really didn't know. I think at this point, there's a lot of things that they need to fix that is related to bugs, and then the way the game is designed feature based that they need to change to improve the quality of the game. I think one of the biggest issues that's holding the game back a lot right now is a lot of slow animations, and they've kind of tuned these to improve them over time, and this feels like one of the biggest reversions in my opinion. So reloading slow, there's lack of sleight of hand, which is kind of like one of those perks that you've gotten people accustomed to. That should just be on by default. And I think that should just be built in or baked into another perk so that it makes it a little bit more advantageous.
Built in. This is one of the agree with them.
I mentioned before the update even dropped, and we had a good list of all the perks. Like there's nothing to speed up your reload, and speeding up reload is pretty important in a fast-paced arcade shooter.
Yeah, like he's 100% right. And the reason why I know he's right is because when I played a game or two on your Stand today, the reloading didn't feel like a problem. When I play on Area 99, I feel like I'm constantly getting caught.
Like Call of Duty. Weapon swapping is incredibly slow. So slow that a lot of times what will happen is if you weapon swap and then you're trying to loot the gun off the ground, you're way
Yes.
quicker, and you'll end up dropping the primary
done
gun
this
that
as
you
well.
originally
I've
swapped
done this
from.
as well.
And you end up with some issues with that. So it's super slow.
He's right
and
here.
One of the number one perks that we had throughout the entire life cycle of pretty much Warzone 1 was the amped perk, which is the weapon swap speed.
Yeah.
And it was like used at like 96%.
Which
Obviously,
is
there were some
insane.
crap perks in perk 3, but in general, it was used basically by every player, and it should be built-in default where you're able to weapon swap faster. Mantling, also kind of slow. Some of the mechanics are just a little bit clunky on that
one
side of it.
hasn't
and that
bothered
just
me.
needs to be tidied up. Whether it needs to be baked into dexterity or default, like we had with the mantling boots or whatever the heck they were called during MW3's life cycle.
This one doesn't
that
bother me,
needs to
but-
come back. Like, I don't care if the game has to be, we want them to be 1-to-1 to Black Ops 6. End of the day, that just doesn't.
Said it before, I will say it again. I don't think Black Ops 6 should be linked necessarily with Warzone. Like, I get the whole leveling up weapons and stuff, and part of me kind of likes that. But at this point, I think it might be better to just have Warzone as a separate game.
Work. Those games are entirely different. The maps are medium to small maps. Black
Maybe
Ops
that's
6 with zombies.
a
They
hot
got their
take, I
own
don't know.
flavor going on. Warzone kind of has to adjust and adapt to incorporate some of these problems. Ammunition, armor, utility box are all incredibly slow. This got fixed last year, and then this is reverted. So it's, you throw the box, you have to wait for it to open,
Yeah.
and then it spits out the item. It's just really clunky, especially when we've gotten accustomed to being able to do things seamlessly. And I feel like that needs a reversion. I think the stim nerf was a little bit dramatic. Obviously, it was probably a little bit overpowered at lasting like 3 seconds at 30% boost speed. But realistically, I felt like where it is now and where it was, they should have probably gone halfway in between. So hopefully they revert this the same way that the feedback has been out there about like the XP tokens. They got rid of them. They said, oh, there's a bug that it creates instability in the game. I have no
Which doesn't make any sense.
clue how. But the reason why you need stims to be powerful, in my opinion, is because what ends up happening is, well, if stim sucks, now you got to divert to the other
They nerfed stims today, by the way.
options.
They nerfed the move speed of them.
Smokes are kind of like whatever. They're not particularly good or as good as they were in MW3. Then that pushes us to more of the toxic style tacticals like flashbangs and stuns, which
That's a good
those are
point.
probably the most annoying piece of equipment in the game, and they actually detract from the gameplay loop. When you get a kill using them, they don't feel particularly rewarding. When you get killed, somebody using them on you, that doesn't feel particularly fair or balanced. Obviously, they're in the game. They kind of always have been. But the reality is you want stims to be powerful because...
Yeah, it's a way of nerfing them without nerfing them, right? If you make something that's better than it and there's more incentive to use that thing, then people will move away from those annoying items without directly having to nerf them.
Because if somebody uses stims on you, it feels like, dang, that person probably finessed me. If you're getting the kill with the stim, then it feels like, oh man, I
Feels good
outplayed
as
them.
opposed to feeling bad.
But you don't really get that same feel with stuns or flashbangs. So that's why
But they
I think
did nerf stims
leaning
movement
towards
speed today.
stims, being like the meta option is fine. Because we don't want every gunfight to essentially be stuns and flashbangs. That kind of sucks. The lack of slide to fire attachments on MW2 and MW3 weapons will severely impact the close range meta options for MW2 and MW3. The slide to fire times on those weapons are just way too slow, and it kind of almost takes
There
them
are
out of
attachments for
viability
that.
unless you just got to change your play style just to not use any sliding, which is kind of counterintuitive when you're trying
There are
to close the
attachments for
distance
that, I will say
with an
that.
SMG. You want to kind of slide into the action, hip fire initially, switch to the ADS, and then you get the kill. I think there's some kind of like tac sprint fatigue. It doesn't want you to do animations too.
Yes, so the dead slide thing I have had a big problem with specifically today, where I go to like slide it behind cover or slide into a gunfight and I hit a dead slide and it just screws me. You like die immediately.
Quick.
Because
I
instead
think
of
they gotta
sliding, you
figure
just
out
stop
if that's
moving.
a bug, they fix it. If it's not a bug, then they need to just make it so that you're able to deal with those animations a little bit quicker. That's sometimes what feels like you get these dead slides,
Yeah.
or feeling less responsive. And then we got the visibility in general.
I
don't
think
know
it's
if just
okay.
like everything feels like a blurriness. I don't know. It's kind of hard to explain because
I haven't
things
had an
look
issue with
clear,
that.
but then it's
I'm gonna be
hard to
honest.
see things. And then you get things added on top of these things, like the low resolution bugs that we had before last year that they ended up fixing. You get things looking like Play-Doh. There was a memory leak related things. And then there's additionally, when you get into the gas, the visibility in the gas is atrocious.
Yes.
They've done some things with it where obviously we
So
saw
that,
some of these things
that perk, whatever it is, that immediately makes a smoke drop, when you down someone can be so frustrating. Like when you down someone and then go to slide in to maybe fight their teammate or finish them, and all of a sudden you can't see anything. So annoying.
Which I'll talk a little bit about in playing early, because one of the feedbacks I always see is like, why didn't you guys complain about this? And this, and we'll get into that. A quick little note about that after I've gone through this. I think the aiming sway is another problem that should have been gone. They improved it.
It's the same thing with Black Ops 6.
3 times throughout MW3's life cycle.
Yep.
And then it's like they chalked it all because they had to use an older version of the game. So some of these things got reverted, which just are trash. It needs to be a much smoother gameplay experience. I think.
Which, by the way, on a lot of my longer range weapons, I'm using attachments for idle sway, which does help with this. But it feels weird to have to do that.
Can add on to some of the guns, and that'll also help. That's just an aside. Desync, netcode, whatever you want to call it.
Bullet velocity on attachments on snipers is stupid good right now.
It feels like it's shoot first, die first. And that's why I've seen a lot of arguments about, oh, the TTK is too fast or the TTK is too slow. Well, with bad netcode, it's both. When you shoot people and they die slow, and then they use the same gun on you, and then you instantly get deleted.
That's the netcode.
There's problems there that aren't related to
Black
the
Ops
weapon
6
balancing,
too.
and I think that leads to a lot of problems with people feeling like shoot first, die first, and that's a problem. Then we got the plethora of bugs, which they've either acknowledged or they're clearly bugs that need to be addressed. Clearly, the first big bug was the audio stuff. They said they addressed some of the stuff. Then they put out Rebirth Island. It had all these issues related to audio.
So he did make this video after Rebirth Island. Okay, so yeah, Rebirth Island is still removed because of this, by the way.
Pulled it away with the playlist update. So audio, they got to figure out whatever the heck is causing those problems. There's a bunch of issues with Create a Class, with blueprints and not blueprints, 8 attachments and 5, and the buy station. They got to figure that out because that's a huge problem. Perks, there's several of the perks where they feel like they're not working because their impact isn't large enough. Whether it's Bird's Eye not doing what it's supposed to, Dexterity, the Mountaineer side of it, you get like, without Dexterity, you fall from like 13 meters, you die. With it, you fall from 16, which really doesn't help. I noticed that today, actually. There's not a lot of scenarios where the building is exactly 15 meters.
I thought I was good and I was not.
So it's terrible. It needs to be fixed or improved to include the way Mountaineer was, because that's something like they've taken away from us essentially with not having that. And I get we didn't have it originally, but the gameplay loop with Mountaineer is so much better, especially if you want to be a little bit more aggressive. So I think that needs extreme buffs or improvements, because there's a lot of the perks where they just don't feel like they're working. High Alert
I've got something for you at the end of this video too.
Well,
so stay tuned for that. Whoops,
really hard to notice when you're being looked at. Attachments, there's tons of attachments that feel like they're buggy. Loadout lags, or they reset. The kill cams they're really like glitchy. The friends list doesn't work properly. You can't res teammates perfectly. Sometimes it'll bug out. So that's the bulk of it, but there's still a lot of other things that I'm sure I'll miss that the people are upset about in the comment section. End of story. A lot of these things probably the biggest one. Fixed, yeah. Right? At the end of the day, we know it because 100%. We've seen the pattern of them consistently breaking something, then they fix it. Break it and fix it. Luckily, the game launched way earlier, so a lot of these will get fixed before the holiday, I would imagine. Most of them. But let's go back to kind of when I was talking about, I had the opportunity to play the game early back in like June, and then I had again to play it at COD Next. And the gameplay from
he played it really early. When I talked to him at COD Next, he's like, yeah, I played it a while ago.
That time period did not have these issues, the visibility issues, the slow animations, the clunkiness. The audio was also significantly better, even better than the version of Warzone audio that we just recently had. A lot of times it's like, well, why didn't
So it seems like they added in this like new audio system super late into the development of Black Ops 6, because no one, when we played COD Next, even after the beta, this new audio system wasn't in the game with like the occlusion and everything like that. And then like they randomly put out this blog post like a week before launch of Black Ops 6, and it was like, this is our new audio system. No one saw it coming. No one knew about it. And then of course they have to put it into Warzone because the games have to be the same. And of course it broke a bunch of things because it was new. It's super weird.
Complain then. Well, those weren't issues then. For whatever reason, when they have a small build and then it works in this little bubble, they expand it to the bigger build and it still works. And then they go to the live servers, then something breaks. So I know there's a lot of times people are I don't think
it's that. I think it has to do with this new audio system that they implemented late.
Well, clearly We played it early. It worked.
I mean, Rebirth is a little weird because it was so bad that how did you not catch
functionally
that?
well, it worked, and then they put it into live, and then it breaks.
And it could also be that.
You can't test live without making it go live. I don't know. It's just kind of how it works. They can do as much as they can to kind of predict problems, but things happen, things break in a live service game. It's just how it goes, unfortunately. End of day, it worked at one point, so I'm sure they'll be able to get it back there. How are you liking the game? I know it has its flaws. Some people are saying they're going to uninstall.
All right, let's talk about that. How are we liking the game? Honestly, like I said, best it's felt since Verdansk. I'm maybe in the minority. Maybe I get called a shill, but want to see something stupid? So today, Charlie Intel tweeted this out. So they put out a new trailer today, which was basically just like, hey, look, Black Ops 6 is doing well, buy it. And in that trailer, it says, get a 30% XP boost, level up faster in Warzone when you buy Black Ops 6. So he also tweeted out, is it gone? This. When you finish a game in Warzone, activate your premium XP boost, purchase Black Ops 6. So you legitimately leveled up faster since like when you own the actual game. And I'm assuming that's with weapons as well. So they're really trying to push the sale of Black Ops 6, which I'm not surprised by. And I'm curious how the game's doing. I wish they would actually put out sales numbers. But honestly, Black Ops 6, enjoying it. Zombies, enjoying it. Warzone, enjoying it. We're eating good this year, at least in my opinion. But if you hate it, let me know too. But yeah, that's what JGod had to say about it. And I pretty much agree with almost everything he said. Yeah, go check out JGod too.